Alright guys, hi, welcome back to English 2. Today we're going to be covering Chapter 7 of Animal Farm. And when we last left our friends off um, in Chapter 6, it was in a weird spot. They had just kind of finished the windmill and a storm had come through and basically destroyed it. And so, of course, Napoleon comes out and is very upset. He knows that this would be a huge blow to morale, and he uses this opportunity as well to blame the destruction of the windmill upon Snowball. And so, life in Animal Farm is hard right now. They're not in a great place mentally. They know they have to rebuild the windmill, and that's going to be hard work because it was hard work the first time. And so they're kind of just dealing with all of that. And on top of that, some of the predictions made in chapter 6 are going to come true. You'll notice my face is not part of the video today. I'm not feeling super great. Um, I ended up staying home today, but I wanted to make sure that I got out what you needed to get done so that you could be successful in this class. Um, it I'm going to start off by reading Chapter 7. I do have the questions for Chapter 7 pulled up over on the right-hand side of my screen. I put my Bitmoji on there so that way you can, imagine that I'm reading to you uh, at my house. Um, but I'm going to get us started, and I'll read the entire chapter to you. It won't take me very long, maybe 20 minutes. And then when I'm done, I'll make sure that this gets posted to YouTube, which is where you'll be viewing this from. Right, so let's get started, all right? So it was a bitter winter. The stormy weather was followed by sleet and snow, and then by a hard frost, which did not break well till well into February. The animals carried on as best as they could with the rebuilding of the windmill, well knowing that the outside world was watching them, and that the envious human beings would rejoice and triumph if the mill were not finished in time. Out of spite, the human beings pretended to not believe that it was Snowball who had destroyed the windmill. They said it had fallen down because the walls were too thin. The animals knew that this was not the case. Still, it was decided to build the walls 3 feet thick this time, instead of 18 inches as they were before, which meant collecting much larger quantities of stone. And for a long time, the quarry was full of snowdrifts and nothing could be done. Some progress was made in the dry, frosty weather that followed, but it was a cruel work, and the animals could not feel so hopeful as they did before. They were always cold and usually hungry as well, only Boxer and Clover never lost heart. Squealer made excellent speeches on the joy of service and dignity of labor, but the other animals found more inspiration in Boxer's actual strength and the never failing cry of I will work harder. In January, food fell short. The corn ration was drastically reduced, and it was announced that an extra potato ration would be issued to make up for it. Then it was discovered that a greater part of the potato crop had been frosted in the clamps, which had not been covered thickly enough. The potatoes had become soft and discolored, and only a few were edible. And for days at a time the animals had nothing to eat but chaff and mangles. Starvation seemed to stare them in the face. It was vitally necessary to conceal this fact from the outside world. Emboldened by the collapse of the windmill, the human beings were inventing fresh lies about Animal Farm. Once again, it was being put about that all the animals were dying of famine and disease, and that they were continually fighting amongst themselves, and had resorted to cannibalism and infanticide. Napoleon was well aware that the bad results of what might follow if the real facts of the food situations were known. It was decided that to make use of Mr. Whymper to spread the contrary information. Hitherto, the animals had little or no contact with Mr. Whymper on his weekly visits. Now, however, a few selected animals, mostly the sheep, were instructed to casually remark in his hearing that the rations had been increased, and in addition, Napoleon had ordered that the almost empty bins in the store shed to be filled nearly to the brim with sand, which was then covered up with what remained of the grain and meal. On the suitable pretext, Whymper was led through the store shed and allowed to catch a glimpse of the bins. He was deceived and continued to report to the outside world that there was no food shortage upon Animal Farm. Nevertheless, towards the end of January, it became obvious that it would be necessary to procure some grain from somewhere else. And in these days, Napoleon rarely appeared in public, but spent all of his time in the farmhouse, which was guarded at each door by a fierce-looking dog. When he did emerge, it was a ceremonial manner, with an escort of 6 dogs who closely surrounded him and growled if anybody came too near. All right. Um, Frequently, he did not even appear on Sunday mornings, but issued his orders through one of the pigs, usually Squealer. All right. On Sunday morning, Squealer announced that the hens who had just come to lay again must surrender their eggs. Napoleon had accepted, through Whymper, a contract for 400 eggs a week. The price of these would pay for enough grain and meal to keep the farm going till summer, when conditions were easier. All right, so that takes us to our first question. Why does Napoleon ask that the eggs be sold by the hens? All right, so as we see, the animals are starving, and Napoleon decides that, like Jones, he is going to sell the eggs to make them some money. All right, and because of that, he has entered a contract that will ensure that the hens provide 400 eggs a week to a market in Willingdon. All right. But the hens are not going to be happy about this, and we're going to continue reading on. In fact, many of the animals won't be happy about this. When the hens heard this, they raised a terrible outcry. They had been warned earlier that this sacrifice may be necessary, but they had not believed that it would really happen. They were just getting their clutches ready for the spring sitting, and they protested that taking away the eggs now was murder. And for the first time since the expulsion of Jones, there was something resembling a rebellion. Led by 3 young black Minorca pullets, the hens made a determined effort to thwart Napoleon's wishes. Their method was to fly upon the rafters and there lay their eggs, which would smash to pieces upon the floor below. Napoleon acted swiftly and ruthlessly. He ordered that the hens' rations must be stopped, and decreed that any animal giving so much as a grain of corn to a hen must be punished by death. The dogs saw to it that these orders were carried out, and for 5 days the hens held out, when they capitulated and went back to their nesting boxes. 9 hens died in the meantime, their bodies buried in the orchard, and it was given out that they had died of coccidiosis. Whymper heard nothing of this affair, and the eggs were duly delivered, the grocer's van driving up to the farm once a week to take them away. All this while no more had been seen of Snowball. He was rumored to be hiding on one of the neighboring farms, either Foxwood or Pinchfield. Napoleon was by this time on slightly better terms with the farmers than he had been before. It had happened that there was in the yard a pile of timber that had been stacked there 10 years earlier when a beech spinney had been cleared. It was well seasoned, and Whymper had advised Napoleon to sell it. Both Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick were anxious to buy it. Napoleon was hesitating between the two, unable to make up his mind, and it was noticed that whenever he came upon seemed to be on a point to coming to an agreement with Frederick, Snowball was declared to be hiding in Foxwood while he was inclined toward Pilkington. Snowball was to be said at Pinchfield. Suddenly, early in the spring, an alarming thing was discovered. Snowball had been secretly frequenting the farm by night. The animals were so disturbed that they could hardly sleep in their stalls. Every night it was said that he came creeping under the cover of darkness and performed all kinds of mischief. All right, he stole corn, upset milk pails, broke eggs, trampled seed beds. He gnawed the bark off of fruit trees. Whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. If a window was broken or a drain was blocked up, someone was certain to say that it was Snowball who had come in the night and done it. And when the key of the store shed was lost, the whole farm was convinced that Snowball had thrown it down a well. Curiously enough, though, they went on believing that, even after the mislaid key was found under a sack of meal. The cows declared unanimously that Snowball crept into their stalls and milked them in their sleep. The rats, which had been troublesome all winter, were also said to be in league with Snowball. All right, and I just realized we should answer number 2. So the hens do not like the fact that that Napoleon wants to sell their eggs. It's very similar to Jones's time. They consider this murder. They were told they wouldn't have to, that they might have to, but that it wasn't a definite, and now it's come true, and so they're very upset. And in fact, they they strike, killing their eggs themselves, and it results in the death of like nine of the hens, and eventually they give up their strike, but not before the 9 hens die. All right. Um, Napoleon decreed that there should be a full investigation into Snowball's activities, and with his dogs in attendance, he set out to make careful tour of inspection of the farm buildings, the other animals following at a respectful distance. At every few steps, Napoleon stopped and snuffed the ground for traces of Snowball's footsteps, which he said he could detect by smell. He snuffed in every corner of the barn, in the cow shed, in the hen houses, in the vegetable garden, and found traces of Snowball everywhere. He would put his snout to the ground, give several deep sniffs, and exclaim in a terrible voice, "Snowball! He has been here, I can smell him distinctly." And at that word Snowball all the dogs let out a blood-curdling growl and showed their teeth. The animals were thoroughly frightened. It seemed to them as though Snowball were some kind of invisible influence, pervading the air about them and menacing them with all kinds of dangers. And in the evening Squealer called them together with an alarmed expression upon his face and told them that he had some serious news to report. And he says, "Comrades," cried Squealer, making little nervous skips. Okay, anytime Squealer shows up, you gotta remember that he is being deceitful. All right, he is propaganda, far and away. So make sure that you are aware of that. So he always is deceitful. All right, he says, "Comrades," cried Squealer, making little nervous skips, "a most terrible thing has been discovered. Snowball has sold himself to Frederick of Pinchfield Farm, who is now plotting to attack us and take our farm away. Snowball is to act as his guide when the attack begins, but what is worse is that we had thought Snowball's rebellion was simply caused by his vanity and ambition, but we were wrong, comrades. Do you know the real reason? Snowball was in league with Jones from the very start. He was Jones's secret agent this whole time. It has all been proven by documents which he left behind him and which we've only now just discovered. To my mind, this explains a great deal, comrades. Did we not see for ourselves how he attempted, fortunately without success, to get us defeated at the Battle of Cowshed? Now, if you remember correctly, Snowball is the reason that they won the Battle of Cowshed, but they're starting to change history. The animals were stupefied. This was a wickedness of far outdoing Snowball's destruction of the windmill. It was some minutes before they could fully take it in, and they all remembered, or thought they remembered, how they had seen Snowball charging ahead of them in the Battle of Cowshed, how he had rallied and encouraged them at every turn, and how he had not paused for an instant when the pellets from Jones's gun wounded his back. And at first it was a little difficult to see how this fitted in with him being on Jones's side, and even Boxer, who seldom questioned anything, was puzzled. He lay down, tucked his forehoofs beneath him, and shut his eyes with hard effort, and managed to formulate his thoughts. "I do not believe that," he said. "Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of Cowshed. I saw him myself. Did we not give him Animal Hero First Class immediately afterwards?" All right, and so this is the first time we see Boxer question um, Napoleon's reign. He's like, "I don't believe what you're telling me." And so now Squiller's going to say, "That was our mistake, comrades, for now we know it is all written down on secret documents that we have just found, that in reality he was trying to lure us to our doom. But he was wounded," said Boxer. "We saw him running with blood. That was part of the arrangement. Jones's shot only grazed him. I could show you this in his own writing, if you were able to read it." Once again, the pigs don't let the animals. Oh, I don't like it. The plot was for Snowball at the critical moment to give the signal for flight and leave the field for the enemy, and he very nearly succeeded. I will even say, comrades, he would have succeeded if it had not been for our heroic leader, Comrade Napoleon. Do you remember now, at that moment when Jones and his men got inside the yard, Snowball suddenly turned and fled, and how many animals followed him? And do you not remember, too, in just that moment, when panic was spreading and all seemed lost, that Comrade Napoleon sprang forward with a cry of death to humanity and sank his teeth into Jones's leg? Surely you remember that, comrades. Guys, this totally did not happen. We read that chapter. That did not happen. Now, when Squealer described the scene so graphically, it seemed to the animals that they did remember it. Well, at any rate, they thought they remembered the critical moment at Snowball had turned to flee, but Boxer was still uneasy. "I do not believe that Snowball was a traitor at the beginning. What he has done since is different, but I believe that the Battle of Cowshed he was a good comrade. Our leader, Comrade Napoleon," announced Squealer, speaking very slowly, "has stated categorically, comrade, that Snowball was Jones's agent from the very beginning, and yes, from long before the rebellion was ever thought of." "Ah," said Boxer, "that's different. Napoleon's always right. That is the true spirit." All right. Okay. "That is the true spirit," cried Squealer, but it was noticed that he cast a very ugly look at Boxer with his little twinkling eyes. He turned to go and then paused and added impressively, "I warn every animal on this farm to keep his eyes very wide open, for we have reason to think that some of Snowball's agents are lurking among us now." 4 days later, in the afternoon, Napoleon ordered all the animals to assemble in the yard, and when they were all gathered together, Napoleon emerged from the farmhouse wearing both of his medal, for he had recently awarded himself both Animal Hero First Class and Animal Hero Second Class, with 9 huge dogs frisking around him and uttering growls that sent shivers down the animals' spines. They all cowered silently in their places, seeming to know in advance that terrible things were going to happen. Napoleon stood sternly surveying his audience when he uttered a high-pitched whimper. Immediately the dogs bounded forward, seized 4 of the pigs by their ears, and dragged them, squealing in pain and terror, to Napoleon's feet. The pigs' ears were bleeding, and the dogs had tasted blood, and for a few moments they appeared to have gone quite mad. To the amazement of everyone, three of them flung themselves upon Boxer. Boxer saw them coming and put out a great hoof, caught a dog in midair, pinned it to the ground. The dog shrieked for mercy, and the other two fled with their tails between their legs. Boxer looked at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go, and Napoleon appeared to change countenance and sharply ordered Boxer to let the dog go, whereat Boxer lifted his hoof, and the dog slunk away bruised and howling. Presently the tumult died down. The four pigs waited trembling, with guilt written all on every line of their countenance. Napoleon now called upon them to confess their crimes. They were the four pigs that had protested when Napoleon had abolished Sunday meetings. Without any further prompting, they confessed that they had secretly been in touch with Snowball, ever since his expulsion, and they had collaborated with him in destroying the windmill, and that they had entered into an agreement with him over Animal Farm to Mr. Frederick. They added that Snowball had privately admitted to them that he had been Mr. Jones's secret agent for past years. When they finished their confession, the dogs promptly tore their throats out, and in a terrible voice, Napoleon demanded that any other animal confess. Three hens, who had been the ringleaders of the attempted rebellion over the eggs, now came forward and stated that Snowball had appeared to them in a dream and incited them to disobey Napoleon's orders. They too were slaughtered. Then a goose came forward and confessed that they had secreted 6 ears of corn during last year's harvest and eaten them in the night. Then a sheep confessed having urinated in the drinking pool and urged to do as she said by Snowball, and two other sheep confessed to having murdered an old ram, an especially devoted follower of Napoleon, by chasing him round and round the bonfire when he was suffering from a cough. They were all slain on the spot, and so the tale of confessions and executions went on until a pile of corpses lay up by Napoleon's feet, which had been unknown since Jones's expulsion. All right, so that takes us to number 3. So the animals continue to confess to being traitors. Um, I think you can kind of look at this as one of two ways. So they believe that their thoughts and actions will eventually be discovered and that they will be killed for it, or they are so miserable on this farm that they choose death over staying. Um, it's up. It's kind of up to you how you choose to see it on this one. Ultimately, I think both are perfectly fine in terms of answers. All right, last page. And I'm coming up. I think I can read this in a few minutes. As he moved off his lumbering trot and made for the quarry, having got there, he collected. Oh, oops. Okay. When it was all over, the remaining animals, except for the pigs and the dogs, crept away at a body. They were shaken and miserable. They did not know what was more shocking, the treachery of the animals who had leagued themselves with Snowball, or the cruel retribution they had just witnessed. In the old days there had often been scenes of bloodshed equally terrible, but it seemed to them that it was far worse now that it was happening amongst themselves. Since Jones had left the farm until today, no animal had ever killed another animal. Not even a rat had been killed. They made their way onto the little knoll where the half-finished windmill stood, and with one accord they lay down as though huddling together for warmth. Clover, Muriel, Benjamin, the cows, the sheep, the whole flock of geese, everyone except for the cat, who had suddenly disappeared just before Napoleon ordered the animals to assemble. For some time nobody spoke. Only Boxer remained on his feet. He fidgeted to and fro, swishing his long-backed tail against his side, and occasionally uttering a little whinny of surprise. And finally he said, "I do not understand it. I would not have believed that such a thing could happen on our farm. It must be due to some fault within ourselves. The solution I see is to work harder. From now onwards, I shall get up a full hour earlier in the morning." Oh, Boxer. And as he moved off at the slumbering trot and made for the quarry, having gotten there, he collected 2 successive loads of stone and dragged them down the windmill before retiring for the night. The animals huddled about Clover, not speaking. The knoll where they were lying gave them a wide prospect across the countryside, and most of the animals were within their view, the long pasture stretching down to the main road, the hayfield, the spinney, the drinking pool, the plowed fields where the young wheat was thick and green, and the red roofs of the barn building with the smoke curling from the chimneys. And it was a clear spring evening. The grass, the bursting hedges were gilded by the level rays of the sun. Never had the farm, and with kind of a surprise they had remembered that it was their own farm, every inch of it their own property, appeared to the animals such a desirable place. As Clover looked down upon the hillside, her eyes filled with tears. If she could have spoken her thoughts, she would have said, if she, it would have been to say that this is not what they had aimed for when they had set themselves years ago to work to overthrow the human race. These scenes of terror and slaughter were not what they had looked forward to on the night that old Major first stirred them to rebellion. If she had any picture of the future, it had been of a society of animals set free from hunger and the whip, all equal, all working according to his capacity, the strong protecting the weak, as she had protected the lost brood of ducklings with a four-leg on the night of old Major's speech. And instead, she did not know why, they had come to a time where no one dared to speak his mind, when fierce growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces for confessing shocking crimes. There was no thought of rebellion or disobedience in her mind. She knew that even as things were, they were better off than they had been in Jones's day, and that before all else it was needful to prevent the return of the human beings. Whatever happened, she would remain faithful, carry out the order, work hard and carry out the orders that were given to her, and accepted the leadership of Napoleon. But still, it was not for this and for all the animals that she had hoped and toiled. It was that she had built the windmill and faced the bullets of Jones's gun. Such were thoughts, though she lacked the words to express them. And at last, feeling this to be in some way a substitute for the words she was unable to find, she began to sing Beasts of England. The other animals rounding took it up and sang it 3 times over, very tunefully, but slowly and mournfully. And they just finished singing it for the third time when Squealer, attended by 2 dogs, approached them with an air of having something important to say, and he announced that by special decree of Comrade Napoleon, Beasts of England was now abolished, and from now onwards they was forbidden to sing it. The animals were taken aback. "Why?" cried Muriel. "Well, it's no longer needed, comrade," Squealer said stiffly. "Beasts of England was the song of the rebellion. The rebellion is now completed. The execution of the traitors this afternoon was the final act. The enemy, both external and internal, has been defeated. In Beasts of England we expressed our longing for a better life in the days to come, but that society has now been established. Clearly the song no longer has any purpose." Frightened though they were, some of the animals might possibly have protested at this moment, but the sheep set up their bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which went on for several minutes and ended the discussion. So Beast of England was heard no more, and in its place the poet had composed another song which began, Animal Farm, never through me shall thou come to harm. And this was sung every Sunday morning after the hoisting of the flag. But somehow neither the words nor the tune ever seemed to the animals to come up to Beasts of England. All right, that last question, why does Napoleon order the animals to stop singing Beasts of England? Because ultimately the rebellion is complete. I mean, he has managed to kill anybody who would be considered a traitor, and they have defeated humanity and have the farm for themselves, so why do they need the song anymore? All right, so that concludes this chapter. I'll be posting a question on Google Classroom as well, so make sure you look for that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.